The champagne flute in my hand was a delicate, cold weight. Around me, the art gallery hummed with the low, cultured murmur of Boston's elite. It was a sound I'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 years, a symphony of soft power and old money. The air smelled of polished wood, expensive perfume, and the faint, crisp scent of the money being discreetly discussed. And at the center of it all, his hand a possessive brand on the small of my back, was Adrian. Adrian Vance. My fiancé. The man who had plucked me from a life of quiet, determined struggle and dropped me into this world of gilded opulence. To the women sipping Chardonnay and assessing my dress with calculated eyes, I was the Cinderella story. The scholarship girl from a nowhere town who'd captured the heart of Boston's most eligible bachelor. Sometimes I even believed it myself. "Smile, my love," Adrian murmured, his lips close to my ear. His breath was warm, laced with the single malt scotch he favored. "The Herald is here. Let's give them a picture of perfect bliss." I tilted my head, letting the diamond drops he'd given me for my last birthday catch the light, and offered the room my practiced, serene smile. The one that didn't reach my eyes. The camera flashed, a brief, blinding star. Adrian's hand tightened, pulling me infinitesimally closer. It wasn't a gesture of affection. It was a statement of ownership. 3 years. Felt like a lifetime in the blink of an eye. I'd been 22, fiercely intelligent and fiercely poor, working 2 jobs to put myself through grad school for art history. I'd been interning at this very gallery when Adrian Vance, scion of the Vance real estate empire, had walked in. He wasn't there for the art. He was there to assess the property value, as the gallery was in a building his family was acquiring. He'd seen me, a nobody in a cheap blazer, passionately explaining a lesser-known O'Keeffe to a disinterested patron. He told me later it was that passion, that fire, that had drawn him in. He'd wanted to possess it, to own it, just like he owned everything else. The courtship was a whirlwind of luxury I'd only ever seen in movies. Private jets to Paris for dinner, diamonds that felt heavy with implication, introductions to people whose names I'd only read in the society pages. He was charming, brilliant, and devastatingly handsome. He made me feel seen, special. He promised me a life where I would never have to worry about student loans or my mother's medical bills again. He promised security. He promised a partnership. I was young enough and worn down enough by life's hardships to believe him. Now at 25, the gilding was beginning to tarnish. The partnership felt more like a curatorship. My opinions were tolerated, not sought. My fire, the very thing he claimed to love, was being systematically smothered under a blanket of his expectations. My job was to be beautiful, agreeable, and a silent, shining accessory on his arm. A living, breathing testament to his impeccable taste. The engagement had been announced 6 months ago. A spectacular, choreographed affair at the Vance family estate. The ring on my finger was a flawless 5-carat emerald-cut diamond, a cold, hard shackle. The wedding was in 2 weeks. A society event of the year. My dress, a custom Vera Wang, hung in my walk-in closet in the penthouse Adrian had bought for us. It was a beautiful prison. "Darling, you're drifting." Adrian's voice cut through my thoughts, a slight edge to its smoothness. "Senator Croft is here. Try to be engaging. His support is crucial for the waterfront development." I nodded, my smile not faltering. Of course. I performed my role flawlessly. I discussed the merits of the new abstract expressionist piece with the senator's wife, my commentary insightful and charming. I laughed at the right moments at the senator's bland jokes. I was the perfect Vance woman in training. But inside, a small, restless part of me was screaming. This was my life. Forever. A series of performances in beautiful rooms. Later, as we were driven home in the silent luxury of his town car, the performance ended. The mask came off. Adrian scrolled through emails on his phone, the blue light etching harsh lines on his handsome face. "The guest list for the rehearsal dinner is finalized. Your mother confirmed her flight. I've moved her to a first-class seat." No sense in her arriving frazzled. He said it without looking up, as if discussing a shipment of office supplies. "Thank you, Adrian. That was kind of you." My voice was quiet. "It's practical." He finally glanced at me. "You'll need to be focused. No distractions. This wedding needs to be perfect." "It will be." I looked out the window at the lights of the city, a tapestry of lives I would never know. My life was a set path, A straight, well-lit road to a predetermined destination. Mrs. Adrian Vance. Good. He went back to his phone. I have to go to the Chicago office tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday. I simply nodded. His business trips were frequent and never up for discussion. At the penthouse, he poured himself another drink and headed for his study. Don't wait up. I have contracts to review. I stood alone in the vast, minimalist living room, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking, lonely view of the city. My heels echoed on the marble floor. This was it. The pinnacle of success. Why did it feel so hollow? I walked to my closet and looked at the wedding dress. It was a masterpiece of silk and lace, a confection of dreams I no longer remembered having. I reached out and touched the delicate fabric. Felt like a costume. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Hey Alara. It's Kaylin. Kaylin Thorne. I know it's been years, but I'm in town for a meeting tomorrow. Any chance you're free for a coffee? I'd love to catch up. Kaylin Thorne. The name was a jolt, a lightning strike from a past life. A life before Adrian, before the galleries and the penthouses. A life where I had laughed, truly laughed, and felt things deeply, recklessly. Kaylin Thorne. Adrian's rival. Not in business, though their worlds collided there too. But in a more fundamental way. In college they had been nemeses. Kaylin, the brilliant, scrappy scholarship student from the wrong side of the tracks, who challenged every privileged notion Adrian held. Adrian, the golden boy who saw Kaylin as an upstart, an annoyance to be crushed. Me. I had been the girl caught in the middle. The girl who, for one unforgettable semester, had been Kaylin's. It had ended badly. A casualty of pride, miscommunication, and Adrian's early, subtle manipulations. I'd chosen the safe harbor of Adrian over the tempestuous, unpredictable ocean that was Kaylin. I stared at the message, my heart hammering against my ribs. A coffee. It was innocent. Catch up with an old friend. But I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my bones, that Adrian would see it as a betrayal. Any contact with Kaylin Thorne was forbidden, an unspoken but absolute rule. My thumb hovered over the screen. To delete the message, to block the number, to continue down the safe, gilded path. Or to reply. I thought of the cold diamond on my finger. The silent penthouse. The performance I had to give in 2 weeks. The lifetime of performances that stretched ahead. I took a deep, shaky breath. And I typed a reply. Hi Kaylin. Coffee sounds great. There's a place on Newberry Street, the Thinking Cup. 10 a.m.? I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The message whooshed away. A tiny act of rebellion launched into the night. I had no idea what would come of it. But for the first time in years, as I stood in my gilded cage, I felt a flicker of the fire Adrian had tried so hard to extinguish. The Thinking Cup was warm and smelled of roasted coffee and baked goods, a stark contrast to the sterile, scented air of my usual haunts. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a small table in the back, my hands wrapped tightly around a latte I hadn't yet tasted. I felt like a spy in my own life. I'd dressed down in dark jeans, a simple cashmere sweater, and a trench coat, an outfit that felt like a disguise from the designer dresses that filled my closet. Every time the bell above the door jingled, my heart leaped into my throat. What was I doing? This was madness. If Adrian found out, I couldn't even finish the thought. The consequences were a yawning chasm of disaster. And then he walked in. Kaylin Thorne. Time did not slow down. It did the opposite. It accelerated, throwing the past 8 years into a blender and spitting out this moment. He was taller than I remembered, his shoulders broader. The lanky boy filled out into a solid, powerful man. He wore a well-cut but not ostentatious dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. His hair was still the same unruly dark brown, a little too long, as if he couldn't be bothered with frequent haircuts. But his eyes were the same. A clear, piercing green that saw everything. They scanned the room and found me instantly. A slow, easy smile spread across his face, and it was like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. It was a genuine smile, devoid of the calculated charm I was so used to. He weaved through the tables with a natural, confident grace that Adrian's practiced poise could never replicate. Alara, he said, his voice a warm, familiar baritone that resonated deep within me. You're early. So are you, I managed, my voice slightly breathless. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat, his gaze never leaving my face. Couldn't wait. The simple honesty of the statement floored me. There was no game, no subtext. Just a man stating a fact. It's good to see you, Kaylin. You too, he said, his eyes doing a quick, appreciative sweep. You look different. Incredible, but different. I self-consciously touched the diamond studs in my ears. Adrian's taste. Time changes everyone. Not everything, he said softly. Your eyes are still the same. Still have that little spark of mischief when you're nervous. I looked down at my coffee, a flush creeping up my neck. He remembered. He saw. A waitress came over and he ordered a black coffee. So, he said, leaning back in his chair. Alara Vance, soon to be. I saw the announcement in the Times. The way he said it wasn't accusatory, just observational. But it hung between us, the elephant in the room, dressed in a 5-carat diamond. It's in 2 weeks, I confirmed, the words tasting like ash. Congratulations, he said, and to my surprise it sounded sincere. Thank you. I took a sip of my latte just to have something to do. What brings you to Boston? Adrian said something about a big tech merger. His eyebrow quirked slightly at the mention of Adrian's name. Something like that. My company developed a new AI-driven security software. We're in final talks with a few interested parties. Your company? You're the CEO? I knew he'd been brilliant in computer science, but this was impressive. Founder and CEO, he corrected with a modest shrug. Thorn Security. Started it in my garage 7 years ago. I was genuinely astonished. Kaylin, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Thanks. It's been a grind. A lot of late nights and cheap ramen. He accepted his coffee from the waitress. But it's paying off now. We fell into an easy rhythm of conversation then, skirting the dangerous topics. We talked about old professors, mutual friends from college, the absurdities of our respective industries. He made me laugh, a real, unforced laugh that felt foreign and wonderful in my chest. I'd forgotten what this felt like, to talk to someone who wasn't assessing my value, who wasn't waiting for me to say the right thing. He challenged me, debated with me about a new artist he'd discovered, and actually listened to my responses. It was intoxicating. And your art? He asked after a lull. You were going to be a curator, shake up the stodgy old art world. Did you ever? The question was a punch to the gut. My art. My dreams. I had a master's in art history from Harvard, a thesis that had been praised as groundbreaking. And what did I do with it? I planned charity galas and approved the color schemes for Adrian's new properties. No, I said, my voice tight. No, my life took a different direction. Kaylin's perceptive eyes softened. I see. And I had the unnerving feeling that he did see. He saw the gilded cage, the silenced passion, the slowly dying flame. Adrian, he provides a very comfortable life. I said, the words a weak defense, more for myself than for him. I'm sure he does, Kaylin said, his tone neutral. He took a slow sip of his coffee. Do you remember our senior year? That terrible, tiny studio apartment I had with the leaking faucet. A smile touched my lips despite myself. The one you swore had character? It did. It had mice, Alara. That's character. He grinned. We'd stay up all night, you trying to explain postmodernism to me trying to explain coding algorithms to you. We'd eat cold pizza for breakfast and talk about how we were going to conquer the world. A lump formed in my throat. I remembered. God, I remembered. The feeling of infinite possibility. The feeling of being with someone who made you feel like you could do anything, be anyone. The feeling of being truly, madly, deeply in love. We were kids, I whispered, the words sounding hollow. We were alive, he corrected gently. Are you alive now, Alara? The question was so direct, so profound, it stole the air from my lungs. I stared at him, my carefully constructed composure cracking. The serene smile, the placid eyes, the whole performance. It all crumbled under the weight of his simple, devastating inquiry. Tears pricked at my eyes. I looked away, blinking rapidly. I have to go. Alara, wait. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His touch was electric, a jolt of pure, undiluted life. It was warm and strong, so different from Adrian's cool, possessive grip. I'm sorry. I overstepped. No, I said, my voice trembling. You didn't. I pulled my hand away, the ghost of his touch burning my skin. It was really good to see you, Kaylin. I stood up, grabbing my bag. I needed to escape. I needed to get back to my safe, numb world before I did something stupid like cry in a coffee shop or throw myself into his arms. He stood as well, his expression unreadable. The offer for coffee stands any time, Alara. For old time's sake. I just nodded, unable to speak, and hurried out of the cafe into the crisp Boston air. I walked blindly, the city noise a dull roar in my ears. His question echoed in my mind, a relentless mantra. Are you alive now, Alara? The truth, the awful, terrifying truth, was that I hadn't been. Not for a long, long time. I'd been existing. I'd been a beautiful, well-dressed ghost in a life that wasn't my own. And seeing Kalen, talking to him, feeling his hand on mine, it was like a defibrillator to my soul. A painful, shocking, necessary jolt back to life. I didn't go back to the penthouse. I walked for hours through parks and along the river, the ghost of a feeling, hope, desire, life, stirring restlessly inside me. The wedding was in 13 days. I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. And the only man who had ever made me feel truly seen was the one man I was forbidden to have. The penthouse was silent when I returned, a relief so profound it felt like a physical weight lifted from my shoulders. Adrian was still in Chicago. I had time to compose myself, to stuff the chaotic, hopeful feelings Kalen had stirred back into the dark box where they belonged. I slipped off my shoes and padded to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water with hands that were still slightly unsteady. The encounter had shaken me to my core. It was as if I'd been living in a black and white movie, and Kalen had blasted the door open, flooding my world with technicolor. My phone left on the counter buzzed. It was Adrian. My heart stuttered, a guilty, frantic rhythm. Had he found out? Was he calling to confront me? I took a deep breath and answered, forcing my voice into its usual placid tone. Adrian. How's Chicago? Cold and tedious. His voice came through, crisp and efficient. The meetings are dragging. I'll be back late Friday night. Hey. I'll have Maria prepare something for you. Maria was our housekeeper. Don't bother. I'll have eaten on the plane. There was a pause, the rustle of papers. Listen, Alara, there's a change of plans for tomorrow night. Oh. Lilly is flying in. Her show closed early in London. I'm going to spend the evening with her. The world tilted on its axis. Lilly. The name was a splash of ice water. Lilly was Adrian's ex-girlfriend, a ballet dancer of ethereal beauty and a personality as sharp as broken glass. Their relationship had been a tumultuous on-again, off-again drama throughout college. She was the one who had gotten away, the great love of his life, or so the story went. She was also the reason for our first and nearly our last major fight. Early in our relationship, I'd discovered texts from her, flirty, intimate messages that crossed every line. Adrian had dismissed it. Lilly is dramatic. She can't let go. It means nothing, Alara. You're the one I'm with. He'd promised to cut ties. He'd called her a relic from a life I've outgrown. And I, the naive girl from the wrong side of the tracks, had believed him. I'd chosen to believe the man who offered me security over the evidence of my own eyes. Lilly. I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. I thought you weren't in contact with her. We're not really, he said, his tone dismissive. But she's in town alone, and it would be churlish not to see her. It's just one night. One night. The words echoed in the vast empty space of the penthouse. One night before our wedding. The rehearsal dinner was in 2 days. Our wedding was in 12 days. Adrian, I said, my knuckles white around the phone. Our wedding is in less than 2 weeks. The rehearsal dinner is the day after tomorrow. Don't you think? Isn't this a bit inappropriate? His sigh was a gust of impatience. Alara, don't be tedious. This is not a debate. I've known Lilly since I was 18. She's an old friend going through a rough patch. I'm simply being a good friend. I expect my future wife to understand that. The condescension in his voice was a familiar sting. Don't be tedious. It was his go-to phrase for shutting down any disagreement, any display of emotion he deemed inconvenient. A good friend. I whispered, the image of those old texts flashing in my mind. The same good friend who sent you pictures of herself in your bed 6 months into our relationship? There was a deadly silence on the other end of the line. I never brought that up. I had learned to swallow my anger, my hurt, to keep the peace. But today, after seeing Kalen, after feeling that jolt back to life, the old wounds felt fresh and raw. That was a long time ago, he said, his voice low and cold. I will not have my character questioned, Alara. Not by you, not by anyone. I am going to have dinner with Lilly tomorrow night. That is the end of this discussion. The finality in his tone was absolute. It was the voice of a king delivering a decree, not a fiancé having a conversation with his partner. And then he said the words that would shatter the last fragile illusion I had of our relationship, of him, of the life I was about to step into. Before our wedding day, I will spend one last night with Lilly. Consider it a closing of a chapter. My life with you begins after the rehearsal dinner. This is just tying up a loose end. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room swam. One last night with Lilly. He'd said it so casually, as if announcing he was getting a haircut. He was framing his pre-wed night rendezvous with his ex-lover as a thoughtful administrative task. A closing of a chapter. As if she was a business merger he was finalizing. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The poison of his words seeped into my veins, cold and paralyzing. Alara? Are you still there? Yes, I managed to choke out. Good. I'll see you Friday. Don't forget the final fitting for your dress tomorrow. I want everything to be perfect. He hung up. The line went dead. I stood there in my multi-million-dollar prison, the phone clutched in my hand, listening to the dial tone. It was the sound of my future. A monotonous, empty hum. One last night with Lilly. The words played on a loop in my head, each repetition stripping away another layer of the fantasy. I wasn't the love of his life. I was the convenient choice. The suitable wife. The well-behaved, presentable woman who wouldn't cause drama, who would fit into his world, who would look the other way while he tied up loose ends with the Lillis of the world. I was the consolation prize. A strange, cold calm began to settle over me, washing away the shock and the hurt. It was a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. This was the truth. This was the man I was going to marry. This was the life I was choosing. I walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the city. The lights twinkled, indifferent. My eyes, however, were no longer seeing the view. They were seeing a path. Kaylin's question came back to me louder than ever. Are you alive now, Alara? No. I wasn't. But I could be. Adrian had just handed me a poisoned chalice and expected me to drink from it with a smile. He had given me his permission, his royal decree, to be an afterthought. A slow, grim smile touched my lips, the first genuine one I'd felt in this apartment in a long time. Fine. If he wanted to spend one last night with Lilly, then he could have it. He could have his loose end. But I would not be waiting at the altar, the dutiful, humiliated bride. He wanted a closing of a chapter? I would give him an ending he would never forget. I picked up my phone again. My hands were steady now. I navigated to my recent messages, to the one from the unknown number. To Kaylin. I typed a message, my fingers flying over the screen, each tap a hammer strike on the coffin of my old life. Kaylin, it's Alara. Change of plans. I don't want coffee. Are you free for dinner tomorrow night? There's something I need to ask you. I didn't wait for a reply. I put the phone down, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, wild exhilaration. The performance was over. The ghost was ready to live again. And Adrian Vance was about to meet his nightmare. The restaurant Kaylin chose was nothing like the Michelin-starred establishments Adrian favored. It was a small, intimate Italian place tucked away on a side street in the North End, all warm brick checkered tablecloths, and the heavenly scent of garlic and simmering tomatoes. It felt real. It felt alive. I saw him waiting at a corner table, a half-empty glass of red wine in front of him. He stood as I approached, and the concern in his eyes was immediate and genuine. Alara, he said, pulling out my chair. You okay? Your text sounded urgent. I sat down, my knees feeling weak. Now that I was here, the audacity of what I was about to do threatened to overwhelm me. This wasn't a coffee. This was a declaration of war. I will be, I said, meeting his gaze. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Always. The single word was a promise. He sat back down, not taking his eyes off me. What's going on? A waiter appeared and Kaylin, without consulting me, ordered a bottle of Burlo. You look like you could use a glass of the good stuff, he said simply. When the waiter left, I took a deep breath. There was no elegant way to say it, so I just said it. Adrian is spending tomorrow night with his ex-girlfriend Lilly. He told me it was his one last night with her. A closing of a chapter before our wedding. I watched the emotions play across Kalen's face. Surprise, then a flicker of anger, then a deep, settling coldness. His jaw tightened. He said that to you? Explicitly. Word for word. The arrogant, entitled son of a bitch, Kalen muttered, his hand curling into a fist on the table. He looked at me, his green eyes blazing. Alaire, you can't marry him. You know that, right? This isn't just a red flag. This is the whole damn factory. I know, I whispered, the truth of it finally fully settling in my soul. I know that now. The waiter returned with the wine, went through the tasting ritual and poured 2 generous glasses. The rich, dark liquid looked like lifeblood. I took a large sip, the alcohol warming a path down my throat, giving me courage. So what's the plan? Kalen asked, his voice low and intent. Do you need a place to stay? I'm calling it off. I can be there with you when you tell him. He doesn't get to do this to you. His immediate, fierce protectiveness brought fresh tears to my eyes, which I angrily blinked away. This was not the time for tears. This was the time for strategy. That's just it, Kalen. I don't want to just call it off. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If I call it off, he wins. He'll spin it. He'll tell everyone I had cold feet, that I was too insecure, that I couldn't handle his friendship with Lilly. He'll be the wounded party. He'll emerge unscathed, and I'll be the hysterical bride who ruined the wedding of the year. My mother, the money he spent, the humiliation. I shook my head. I won't give him that satisfaction. Understanding dawned in Kalen's eyes, followed by a glint of something dark and dangerous. Amusement. Respect. You want revenge. I want justice, I corrected, though the line felt thin. I want him to feel a fraction of the humiliation he's so casually inflicted on me. I want him to know what it feels like to be a footnote in his own story. Kalen took a slow sip of his wine, his gaze never leaving mine. I'm listening. This was it. The point of no return. I took another fortifying gulp of wine. The wedding is in 12 days. It's all paid for. The venue, the flowers, the caterer, the guests. Everyone who is anyone in Boston will be there. I paused, letting the implication hang in the garlic-scented air between us. Kalen's lips curved into a slow, wicked smile. It transformed his face from handsome to devastating. You want to still have the wedding? I want to walk down the aisle, I said, my voice steady now, filled with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I want to stand in front of all those people. But I don't want to marry Adrian. Then who do you want to marry, Alaire? I held his gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the craziest, most terrifying, most exhilarating moment of my life. You. The word hung in the air, a nuclear option. Kalen didn't even flinch. He didn't look shocked or appalled. He just watched me, that dangerous smile still playing on his lips, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. Me, he repeated as if tasting the word. You're his biggest rival, I said, the plan pouring out of me now that I'd spoken its core. The one man he could never beat fairly in college. The one whose success now grates on him because it wasn't handed to him. You are his nightmare. Marrying you in his wedding in front of his family and friends. It would destroy him. It would be a humiliation from which he would never, ever recover. Kalen was silent for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. The air crackled with tension. This is a hell of a proposition, Alaire, he said finally. You're asking me to become your husband, a role I once wanted more than anything, as an act of revenge against the man who took you from me. His words were a fresh shock. What? He looked at me and the raw, old hurt was there in his eyes just for a second. You think I didn't want to marry you? I was 22 years old and broke, and I was saving every damn penny from my internship to buy a ring I knew you'd hate because it was so small. And then he swooped in with his private jets and his family name, and I saw the way you looked at that life. The security. I knew I couldn't compete. So I let you go. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All these years I'd thought he hadn't cared enough. I'd thought our breakup was about pride, about a stupid argument. I never knew. Kalen, He held up a hand. It's ancient history. The point is, this isn't just a business deal for me, Alaire. Even as a revenge plot, it's personal. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur. So, I have one question. Is this only about revenge? Or is there a part of you, even a tiny hidden part, that remembers what we had? That maybe, just maybe, wants to see if that ember can still catch fire? His question was more terrifying than my own audacious plan. Because the answer wasn't simple. The revenge was a bright, burning star of motivation. But underneath it was the ghost of that feeling from the coffee shop. The jolt. The memory of cold pizza and all-night conversations. The way his hand on mine had felt like coming home. I don't know, I answered honestly, my voice soft. But I know I can't do this without you. And I know that the thought of standing at that altar with you feels right. It feels like freedom. Kalen studied my face for a long, intense moment. He was weighing the risks, the madness, the potential for catastrophic public failure. He was weighing his own bruised heart against the chance to finally, definitively beat Adrian Vance at his own game. Finally, he raised his glass. To closing chapters, he said, his voice a low, thrilling promise. And to new beginnings. Let's burn his world to the ground. A wild, reckless joy surged through me. I clinked my glass against his. To the wedding, I said. We had 12 days to plan the most spectacular act of social sabotage in Boston's history. And as I looked into Kalen's determined, fiery eyes, I knew with every fiber of my being that we were going to win. The next 12 days were a masterclass in subterfuge. My life became a dizzying double act, a performance within a performance. By day, I was the blushing, slightly stressed bride, attending final dress fittings, cake tastings, and meetings with the wedding planner, a formidable woman named Beatrice who spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the Vance legacy. By night, I was a conspirator, a revolutionary plotting a coup in the heart of the empire. Adrian returned from Chicago on Friday night, exactly as planned. He was in a brisk, efficient mood, pleased with his business dealings and, I suspected, looking forward to his last night with Lilly. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't notice the new, steely glint in my eyes. The final guest list is locked, he announced over a silent dinner. I've had security briefed. No uninvited plus ones. He said it with a pointed look, as if he suspected I might try to invite some undesirable element from my past. Little did he know. Of course, I said, spearing a piece of asparagus. We wouldn't want any surprises. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My meetings with Kalen were clandestine and efficient. We couldn't risk being seen together. We met in the back room of a quiet law firm owned by an old friend of his, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah who seemed to relish the chaos we were brewing. The legalities were the first hurdle. A marriage license was surprisingly easy to obtain. We went together during a time I was supposedly at a spa day with my bridesmaids, a group of Adrian's friends' girlfriends I barely knew. Standing next to Kalen at the clerk's office, filling out the forms, felt more real and more terrifying than any moment I'd spent planning the wedding with Adrian. The bigger challenge was the ceremony itself. We couldn't change the officiant. He was a family friend of the Vances. But Kalen, with his tech resources, found a solution. He's a universal life minister, Kalen said, tapping his laptop. Online certification. Sarah can get ordained by next week. Sarah the lawyer grinned. I've always wanted to preside over a public execution. This is the next best thing. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Sarah would pose as a last-minute assistant for Beatrice, the wedding planner. She would have the real marriage license for Kalen and me. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" a tradition Adrian had insisted on, my mother, who was blissfully unaware and just happy I was marrying into money, would do her part. Then, at the crucial moment, Sarah would step forward. The trick was the question itself. The officiant would say, "Do you, Adrian, take Alara?" And Adrian would say, "I do." Then he would turn to me. "And do you, Alara, take Adrian?" And I would say nothing. That was the signal. That was the moment the world would stop. In that silence I would turn, look down the aisle and hold out my hand. And Kalen, who would have been seated in the back, disguised in a suit and glasses, would walk up to me. Sarah would then take over, presenting our license and officiating our vows. It was a theatrical high-risk plan. 1,000 things could go wrong. Adrian could have Kalen thrown out before the ceremony. The real officiant could protest. A guest could recognize Kalen. But the beauty of it was its sheer, unthinkable audacity. No one would see it coming because no one in Adrian's world would ever believe someone could have the gall to do it. The most dangerous moment came the night before the wedding at the rehearsal dinner. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Vance family's country club. I wore a pale gold sheath dress, another Adrian-approved choice, and smiled until my face ached. Adrian was at his most charming holding court, the magnanimous king on the eve of his coronation. He kept a possessive hand on my back, his touch making my skin crawl. I played my part to perfection, laughing at toasts, blushing at innuendos, looking at him with what I hoped passed for adoration. And all the while my eyes kept drifting to the entrance. Kalen was here. Our final reckless check-in. He'd crashed the dinner, using an old invitation for a different club event. He was standing in the shadows near the bar, wearing a server's uniform he'd acquired, looking infuriatingly handsome. Our eyes met across the crowded, glittering room. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. A shiver of anticipation, of pure, undiluted fear and excitement, ran down my spine. "You're quiet tonight, my love," Adrian murmured, pulling me closer. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "You have no idea," I said, my voice sweet. He smiled, mistaking my meaning. "Don't be. It will be perfect. The start of our perfect life together." Just then Lilly made her entrance. She was tall, willowy, dressed in a dramatic crimson dress that screamed for attention. She floated over to Adrian, ignoring me completely, and air-kissed his cheeks. "Adrian, darling. The place looks wonderful. All ready for the big day." Her voice was a silken purr. "Lilly," Adrian said, his tone a mix of indulgence and something else. "Pride. I'm glad you could make it." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," she said, her eyes sliding to me, cold and dismissive. "Elara. You look very sweet." The condescension was a work of art. I simply smiled. "Thank you, Lilly. I'm so glad you and Adrian had a chance to close your chapter. It must be a relief to have that behind you." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Adrian's grip on my waist tightened warningly. I just kept smiling, the picture of innocent sincerity. Later, as Adrian was pulled away by his father, I found a moment alone on the terrace. The cool night air was a blessing. I leaned against the stone balustrade, looking up at the stars, trying to steady my racing heart. I felt a presence behind me. "Nervous?" Kalen's voice was soft in the darkness. I turned. He was still in the server's outfit, holding a tray of empty champagne flutes. We were alone. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if it doesn't work? What if he has you thrown out? What if I lose my nerve?" He put the tray down and took my hands. His were warm and steady. "Look at me, Elara. Do you trust me?" I looked into his green eyes, so full of conviction and a fierce, protective light. "Yes." "Then don't be afraid. Tomorrow when you walk down that aisle, you're not walking towards him. You're walking towards me. You're walking towards your freedom. Just keep your eyes on me." He squeezed my hands. "We're going to make history." He leaned in and, before I could react, brushed a soft, fleeting kiss against my lips. It was over before it began, but it sent a shockwave through my entire system. It was a promise. A seal on our devil's bargain. "See you at the altar, partner," he whispered, and then he was gone, melting back into the shadows of the party. I touched my lips, the ghost of his kiss burning there. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it was now eclipsed by a blazing, unshakable certainty. Tomorrow I wouldn't just be leaving Adrian Vance at the altar. I would be claiming my life back. And I would be doing it with the one man who had ever made me feel truly, completely alive. The web was woven. The trap was set. All that was left was the wedding. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect cloudless blue sky. A Vance day, as his mother had smugly declared. The universe, it seemed, was complying with the script. I sat in the lavish bridal suite of the cathedral, a Gothic revival masterpiece that the Vance family had essentially rented for the day. My dress hung from a padded hanger, a specter of silk and lace. My makeup artist and hairdresser had just left, having transformed me into the picture of a blushing bride. My face was porcelain perfect, my eyes artfully shaded, my hair an intricate cascade of curls held in place by what felt like 1,000 pins and a diamond tiara that belonged to Adrian's grandmother. I looked the part. I looked like a Vance. My mother fluttered around me, her eyes brimming with happy tears. "Oh honey, you look so beautiful. So perfect. I'm so happy for you." She knew nothing of the storm that was coming. It was the one part of the plan that filled me with gut-wrenching guilt. But telling her would have risked everything. She wasn't a good liar. "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice tight. There was a knock on the door. It was Beatrice, the wedding planner, her headset on, a clipboard in hand. "5 minutes, Elara. Are you ready?" "Well, I've never been more unready for anything in my life." "Yes," I said, standing up. The heavy silk of the dress rustled around me. "I'm ready." My mother kissed my cheek and left to take her seat. I was alone with Beatrice and my 2 assigned bridesmaids, who were already sipping champagne and giggling. They helped arrange my veil, a whisper-fine lace that fell over my face, obscuring my vision just enough. The opening notes of Wagner's bridal chorus began, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the stone floor. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. The massive oak doors of the suite opened, revealing the long, cavernous length of the cathedral aisle. It was a sea of faces, hundreds of them, all turned towards me. The air was thick with the scent of thousands of white roses and gardenias. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned patterns on the stone floor. And at the far end, standing tall and confident before the ornate altar, was Adrian. He looked impeccable in his morning suit, a slight, proud smile on his face. He was sure of his victory. He was waiting to receive his prize. My legs felt like lead. I couldn't move. "You're not walking towards him. You're walking towards me." Kaylin's voice echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the roaring sea of my panic. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I lifted my chin. And I took the first step. The walk felt like an eternity. The music swelled. People smiled, some dabbing at their eyes. I saw Adrian's parents, his mother looking regal and satisfied, his father nodding his approval. I saw Lilly sitting in the 3rd row, a small, knowing smirk on her perfectly painted lips. She thought she had won a secret victory. But I kept walking. One foot in front of the other. My bouquet of white orchids trembled in my hands. "Keep your eyes on me." I let my gaze drift from Adrian just for a second, scanning the back of the church. And there he was. Standing in the shadows of the last pew, having shed his server's disguise. Kaylin was in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his hair tamed but still rebellious. He wasn't looking at the spectacle. He was looking only at me. His expression was intense, focused, a rock in the storm. He gave me a single slow nod. Strength flooded my veins. My steps became surer. I was no longer a lamb being led to slaughter. I was a queen walking to claim her throne. I reached the end of the aisle. Adrian's smile widened as he took in the vision I presented. He reached out his hand. I placed my icy fingers in his warm, confident grasp. His touch was a brand, but this time it didn't burn with submission. It burned with rebellion. We turned to face the officiant, a kindly-faced older man. The ceremony began. It was a blur of traditional words, prayers and readings. I heard none of it. My entire being was focused on the moment to come. I could feel Kaylin's presence behind me, a steady, thrumming energy. Finally it was time. "Who presents this woman to be married to this man?" the officiant asked. My mother's voice, choked with emotion, came from the front row. "I do." The officiant turned to Adrian. "Adrian Michael Vance, do you take Elara Rose Finnegan to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do you part?" Adrian's voice was clear, strong, and utterly sure. "I do." He squeezed my hand. Then the officiant turned to me. The entire cathedral seemed to hold its breath. "And do you, Elara Rose Finnegan, take Adrian Michael Vance to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do you part?" This was it. The silence. I didn't speak. I stood perfectly still, my veil hiding my expression from the congregation, but Adrian could see me. His smile faltered. Confusion flickered in his eyes. "Elara," the officiant prompted gently, thinking I was overcome with emotion. Adrian's grip on my hand tightened, a silent, demanding pressure. "Say it." I slowly, deliberately pulled my hand from his. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. A soft murmur. I turned my back on Adrian. I faced the congregation. I lifted my veil, letting it fall back over the tiara. My face was calm, serene, my eyes clear and determined. I ignored the gasps, the shocked whispers. I looked down the long aisle to the man standing in the back. And I held out my hand. "Kaylin," I said. My voice, amplified by the cathedral's acoustics, was quiet but carried to every corner. It was not a question. It was a summons. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. The world was frozen in disbelief. And then Kaylin Thorne began to walk. He didn't rush. He moved with a predator's grace, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He didn't look at anyone else. His eyes were locked on mine, a green fire burning with pride, with promise, with a love I hadn't dared to believe was still there. He walked the entire length of the aisle as every single guest, including a completely paralyzed Adrian, watched in utter, dumbfounded shock. He reached me. He took my outstretched hand. His grip was firm, warm, real. "I'm here," he said, "for my ears only." That's when the spell broke. "What is the meaning of this?" Adrian's father roared, standing up. "Alara, have you lost your mind?" Adrian's voice was a strangled, disbelieving croak. His face was a mask of shock and dawning, furious humiliation. Sarah, my lawyer officiant, stepped forward from her place with the wedding planners team. She held up a document. "The ceremony will continue," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "But with a different groom." Chaos erupted. The cathedral, once a sanctuary of hushed reverence, descended into bedlam. It was a swarm of confused whispers turning into shocked exclamations, then into outright uproar. Chairs scraped as people stood for a better view. Adrian's mother let out a theatrical gasp and fanned herself dramatically. Lily's smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of pure venomous hatred directed squarely at me. But at the center of the storm, at the foot of the altar, there was a bubble of surreal calm. Adrian was a statue carved from pure white rage. He stared at me, then at Kaylin, his brain seemingly unable to process the betrayal, the audacity, the public evisceration of his pride. "You," he finally spat, the word dripping with a venom I'd never heard from him. He took a step towards Kaylin. "You did this. You poisoned her against me." Kaylin didn't flinch. He simply moved slightly, positioning himself between Adrian and me. A protective, possessive gesture that spoke volumes. "She doesn't need poisoning, Vance. The truth about you is toxic enough." Adrian's eyes snapped back to me, blazing with a fury so intense it was almost a physical force. "Alara, what the hell are you doing? This isn't funny. Stop this ridiculous charade at once." "It's not a charade, Adrian," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I tightened my grip on Kaylin's hand, drawing strength from it. "You were right. This is a closing of a chapter. My chapter with you. You are my fiancé," he shouted, his composure shattering. The perfect, polished veneer cracked, revealing the petulant, entitled man beneath. "You are standing in my family's church in a dress I paid for to marry me." "The dress is mine," I countered coolly. "And the only thing I'm taking from you today is my freedom." Sarah stepped forward again, her voice cutting through the din. "If we could have order, please. We are here to witness the joining of Alara Rose Finnegan and Kaylin James Thorne in matrimony. The rest of you are guests. Please be seated or you will be removed." A few burly men, Kaylin's security team, I realized, materialized at the edges of the congregation, their presence a silent, effective threat. The crowd, cowed by the display of authority and hungry for the drama, slowly settled back into their seats. They weren't going to miss this for the world. Adrian let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "You can't be serious. This is illegal. You can't just hijack a wedding." "The marriage license is legal and binding," Sarah said, holding up the document. "And as an ordained minister of the Universal Life Church, I am fully authorized to perform the ceremony. Now, Mr. Vance, you can either take your seat and be a witness, or my associates will escort you out. The choice is yours." The humiliation was complete. He was being given a choice between being a spectator to his own nightmare or being physically thrown out of his own wedding. The color drained from his face, then flooded back in a blotchy, angry red. He looked at his parents, who looked horrified and helpless. He looked at the guests, whose faces were a mixture of shock, pity, and barely concealed glee. The mighty Vance family was being publicly gutted. He took a staggering step backward, but he didn't leave. He stood there, rooted to the spot, a prisoner in the theater of his own ruin. He had to watch. He had to see it through. Sarah didn't waste another moment. She turned to us, a triumphant glint in her eye, and began the ceremony anew. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of these witnesses to join Elara and Kaelin in marriage. Her words were a distant hum. All I could see was Kaelin. All I could feel was his hand in mine. The world, the chaos, the furious presence of Adrian, it all faded into a blur. We had written our own vows, simple and direct, a stark contrast to the flowery, traditional ones meant for Adrian and me. Kaelin, Sarah said, do you take Elara to be your wife, to stand by her through whatever chaos she brews, to be her partner in crime and in life, to love and cherish her from this day forward? Kaelin's eyes, full of a love so deep and fierce it stole my breath, held mine. I do, he said, his voice strong and clear, a vow meant for me and me alone. Elara, Sarah continued, do you take Kaelin to be your husband, to embrace the fire he brings, to be his sanctuary and his spark, to love and cherish him from this day forward? I looked at this man who had walked into my gilded cage and handed me the key, who had seen the ghost of who I was and blown the embers back to life, who was standing with me now in the heart of the inferno, not as a rescuer but as a partner. I do, I said, and the words were the most true and freeing I had ever spoken. The rings. We hadn't had time for rings. Kaelin, ever prepared, reached into his pocket and pulled out two simple, elegant platinum bands. Later he would tell me he'd bought them the day after our dinner in the North End, so sure was he of this outcome. We slid them onto each other's fingers. The metal was cool, but the gesture was incandescent with heat. By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Universal Life Church, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Sarah beamed. Kaelin, you may kiss your bride. He didn't need a second invitation. He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs stroking my cheeks, and leaned in. This kiss was nothing like the fleeting brush in the darkness. This was a claiming, a promise, a sealing of our pact. It was deep, passionate, and full of a love I thought I'd lost forever. The cathedral, the guests, everything disappeared. There was only him and me and the beginning of everything. When we finally broke apart, the church was utterly silent. Then a single pair of hands began to clap. It was my mother. Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling, a true, genuine smile of understanding and relief. She, of all people, knew what I had escaped. Her applause was joined by another, then another. Soon, a smattering of claps echoed through the cathedral, not a full-throated celebration, but a stunned, respectful acknowledgement of the sheer, breathtaking audacity of what they had just witnessed. Kaelin grinned, that wild, rebellious grin I loved, and laced his fingers through mine. He turned us to face the congregation, raising our joined hands in victory. And that's when we saw him. He was on his knees. Not in prayer. He was crumpled, broken. The arrogant, untouchable king of his world was shattered. Great, ragged sobs racked his body. His shoulders shook. He was completely, utterly broken down. The sound that came from him was one of pure, animalistic agony. He had lost. Not just the wedding, not just the bride, but his dignity, his pride, his invincibility. He had been destroyed in front of everyone who mattered to him, by his biggest rival and the woman he considered his property. The sight should have brought me satisfaction. And a part of me, the part that remembered his cold decree about Lilly, did feel a sharp, clean slice of justice. But mostly I felt nothing for him at all. He was a ghost. A chapter 1 had closed. Let's go, Kaelin murmured in my ear. Our life is waiting. And hand in hand, husband and wife, we walked back down the aisle, through the gauntlet of stunned faces, leaving the ruins of Adrian Vance's perfect world behind us. We stepped out of the dark cathedral and into the brilliant, blinding sunlight of our future. The limousine door slammed shut, sealing us in a bubble of plush, quiet luxury. For a moment, there was only the sound of our breathing, harsh and ragged from the adrenaline crash. Then I looked at Kaelin and he looked at me, and we both burst into uncontrollable, hysterical laughter. It was the laughter of relief, of triumph, of sheer, unadulterated madness. We had done it. We had actually pulled it off. His face, Kaelin gasped, wiping tears from his eyes. Did you see his face when you held out your hand? I thought he was going to spontaneously combust. He was on his knees, I said, the laughter subsiding into breathless giggles. He was actually on his knees, sobbing. The reality of it settled over us, and our laughter slowly faded, replaced by a warm, dazed wonder. We were married. Married. I looked down at the platinum band on my finger, a simple, elegant circle that felt infinitely more valuable than the cold diamond rock I had given back to Adrian via a stunned Beatrice before we left. So, Kaylin said softly, taking my left hand and intertwining our fingers, our wedding bands clicking together. Mrs. Thorne. How does it feel? I let the name settle in my soul. Lara Thorne. It didn't feel like a mask. Felt like my own skin. It feels real, I whispered. It feels like I can finally breathe. He lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, his eyes serious now. I meant what I said in there, Alara. Every word. This started as revenge, but for me it ended the moment I saw you walk down that aisle towards me. It was always you. It will always be you. Tears, happy and freeing, welled in my eyes. I think I started falling for you again the moment you walked into that coffee shop. I admitted. You asked me if I was alive. And being with you, even planning this insane thing, was the most alive I'd felt in years. He leaned in and kissed me, a slow, tender kiss that tasted of promise and a future we would build together on our own terms. The limo didn't take us to the airport for the honeymoon in Bali that Adrian had planned. Instead, it drove us to a private airfield where Kaylin's company jet was waiting. Our destination was a secret. Somewhere with no guest list, no society pages and no past, he'd said. As the jet climbed above the clouds, leaving Boston and its dramas far below, I felt a weight I had carried for years finally lift. I wasn't Alara, the scholarship girl. I wasn't Alara, the Vance accessory. I was Alara Thorne. So of my own life. The fallout was, as expected, nuclear. My phone, which I'd left behind, would have been blowing up. The society blogs and even the mainstream news had a field day. Vance wedding hijacked. Billionaire left in tears as bride marries rival. The headlines were brutal, sensational, and exactly what we'd anticipated. But from our secluded villa in Santorini, overlooking the caldera, it all felt like a distant, irrelevant dream. We spent our days exploring, talking, and rediscovering each other. We swam in the Aegean, fed each other under the stars, and made love with a passion and intimacy that was both familiar and thrillingly new. It was a second chance, a first love, and a grand adventure all rolled into one. We learned through Sarah that Adrian had become a recluse. The humiliation had been too profound. The Vance stock had taken a temporary hit, more from the blow to their invincible image than anything financial. Lilly, in a fit of pique, had given a tell-all interview about her last night with Adrian, confirming every sordid detail and making him look even more foolish. Kaylin and I, however, became something of an enigma. A modern-day fairy tale of sorts, but with a dark, delicious twist. Thorne Securities' profile skyrocketed. My own credentials, long buried, were dug up by curious journalists. I was offered a position as a guest curator at a prestigious museum in New York, a city far from Boston's ghosts. I accepted. One evening, about a month after the wedding, we were sitting on our terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Kaylin's arm was around me, my head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "The way we did it. The mess." He was silent for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Regret marrying the love of my life in the most spectacular fuck you in Boston's history?" He chuckled. "Not for a second. It was our truth, Alara. Messy, chaotic, and fiercely ours. We didn't sneak away in the night. We stood our ground and took back our narrative in the most public way possible. We showed them all that we weren't pawns in their game. We were the players." He was right. We hadn't just escaped. We had conquered. "You know," I said, a smile playing on my lips. He said spending the night with Lilly was a closing of a chapter. I looked up at my husband, my partner, my second love, and my sweetest revenge. He had no idea he was the prologue to our story. Kaylin leaned down and kissed me, a deep, lingering kiss that held the promise of all our tomorrows. "And what a story it's going to be," he whispered against my lips. And as the stars began to pepper the velvet sky above our Greek island sanctuary, I knew with every fiber of my being that it was only the beginning. The end.